Ever feel like kind of like a pushover? You know, constantly being disrespected, but like the thought of turning into some aggressive, confrontational person just doesn't sit right with you.
Yeah, I think that's a really common struggle.
Yeah.
It is.
So today we're diving into this fascinating Reddit thread, right? Someone is dealing with this exact problem,
Mm-hmm.
and they want advice on how to command respect, but, without becoming that person that they don't want to be.
Right. And it's so interesting to see the range of advice that people give
Yeah, the responses they got.
because it shows you there's no one right way to do
Oh,
this.
tons of opinions. Like, it's all over the map. Some people are like, direct confrontation, like, just go right at it.
Yeah.
Him commenter even said, become shamelessly fine with putting yourself first. But then you have other people who are like, no. You got to be much more subtle.
Right.
Like, use silence, master the unimpressed look. Someone even said practice trash talk online to, like, build up your,
You're confident.
Yeah. So to give you a better understanding of what we're even talking about here, let's go into the original poster's dilemma. What they were going through, right? They were feeling like they were constantly insulted, even publicly humiliated sometimes.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where they felt trapped between staying silent or like snapping,
Yeah. And I think it's important to acknowledge the emotional toll that this kind of treatment takes.
Oh, totally.
Because when you feel disrespected, it chips away at your self-worth.
Right.
And that actually can make it even harder to advocate for yourself. So it becomes a cycle.
Absolutely. And that's where this whole internal conflict comes in. Like, okay, I don't want to be a pushover, but I also don't want to be someone I'm not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Someone who's always picking fights or being aggressive.
But it's about finding a happy medium.
Yeah. How do you find that sweet spot?
It is, and it's about finding the right way to assert yourself for your personality, but also that works for the situation.
Okay.
So I like to think about it as like asserting yourself on a scale.
I like that.
So on one side you have, that direct confrontation.
Yeah.
And on the other side you have those more subtle strategies.
Okay, so it's a spectrum of assertiveness, right? Like you got different tools and techniques, depending on where you fall in that.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's break down these two approaches, right? Like, what are the pros and cons of each?
Well, with confrontation, you're being very direct.
Right.
You're saying, hey, this is not okay.
Yeah.
And sometimes, especially if someone's just being blatantly rude or insensitive, that can work.
Yeah. It can make them stop and think.
Exactly. Yeah. However, there are risks with that too.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it can escalate the situation.
Oh, yeah.
Especially if there's any kind of power imbalance. Like, is this your boss?
Right.
Is this a family member, someone in a position of authority?
Yeah, you don't want to jeopardize your job.
Right, exactly.
Or like a crucial relationship.
Yeah. You have to pick your battles there.
So picking your battles is key with that. Now let's talk about the other side, that subtle approach.
Yeah.
So what makes that effective? And are there any downsides?
So subtlety, it's all about really using your presence. It's about setting boundaries and that nonverbal communication.
Oh, yeah. Like the look?
The look, the pause.
The pause.
The well-placed word that just gets them to question their actions without having to go into that full-blown confrontation.
Oh, I love that. It's almost like you make the disrespect uncomfortable for them.
Exactly.
One commenter suggested when someone insults you, you just respond with, damn, you really need my attention that bad.
Oh, I love that.
Followed by a smirk and then silence.
Yes.
It's perfect.
Perfect example.
Because it's not aggressive.
No.
But it just shifts that power dynamic.
It does. And it's so disarming because you're not playing their game.
Totally.
They're changing the rules of the game.
And this isn't all hypothetical, right? Another person in the thread talked about a colleague who was trying to, undermine them. They didn't confront them directly, but they brought it up to someone in authority. Calmly, Guess what? The colleague apologized.
Yeah.
And they actually ended up gaining more respect from everyone.
That is such a great example of how just understanding the social dynamics can be so powerful.
Yeah.
Because in that situation, they didn't stoop to that person's level.
Totally.
But they still turned the tables.
So we have these two approaches.
Yeah.
But we've established there's no one right way to do this.
Right. Right. And I think the point is that it depends on you. It depends on the situation, and it depends on what the consequences could be.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's about blending the two. You might start subtle.
Right.
And if that doesn't work, then you have to get a little more direct.
So it's like building your own personal toolkit, right? For dealing with this.
Yes.
So you got your direct confrontation tools for when you got to draw the line in the sand. And then you got your subtle tools for when you need a lighter touch. So as you're listening to this, think about which tools resonate with you. Which strategies would you feel comfortable with, and which ones might you need to practice?
Yeah.
Maybe adapt to your own circumstances.
Right. And remember, all of this takes time and practice.
Yeah.
But it's not about becoming someone you're not.
Okay.
It's about developing those skills and that confidence to assert yourself authentically and effectively.
Love it.
So let's get a little bit more tactical here, right?
Okay.
Let's actually give people some tools, some techniques that can help them when they're in those tricky situations where they feel disrespected.
Yes. Let's give them something they can use today to feel more confident.
Okay, so one of the most powerful tools you have is something you don't even say out loud.
Oh, I like this.
It's all nonverbal.
Verbal communication.
How you carry yourself, right?
Right.
Your posture, your facial expressions,
Right.
even how you make eye contact, all of that. It's saying a lot before you even open your mouth.
Totally. It's
Yeah.
like you're sending out these signals, right? And they can either make you seem confident or, unfortunately, make you seem like a pushover.
Exactly. Yeah.
So for people who want to project that don't mess with me vibe, what are some things they can do?
Well, think about it this way. When you don't feel confident, what do you tend to do? You kind of make yourself smaller.
Oh, hunch over, yeah?
You slouch your shoulders. Maybe you avoid eye contact.
Yeah.
Which is totally natural, but it reinforces those feelings.
Right.
So what you want to do is the opposite.
Okay.
Stand tall, shoulders back, head held high.
Okay.
Imagine like a string is pulling you up from the crown of your head.
Yep.
And that simple adjustment, honestly, it can make such a difference in how you're perceived, but also how you feel.
I can see that. Like, I definitely notice that I do that. Like, when I'm stressed, I hunch over. It's
Yeah.
like almost an instinct.
Yeah.
But consciously correcting my posture, it could make me feel more powerful. Like, almost taking up space, like I deserve to be there.
Absolutely. Like you're not shrinking back. You
Yeah.
know, you're present, you're engaged,
Yeah, yeah.
you're demanding attention in a way.
I like that. Okay, now what about eye contact?
Ooh, yes.
I know that can be a hard one for people, especially if you're more introverted, you know?
It can.
But I know it's important.
It is, yeah.
So how do you do it without feeling like you're, like, staring someone down?
It's finding a balance, right?
Right.
You don't want to laser focus on them,
Right.
but you don't want to avoid their gaze altogether.
Right.
So aim for a nice, steady gaze, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Hold their gaze for a couple seconds, then look away naturally.
Yeah.
It's almost like you're acknowledging them.
Yeah.
And you're showing them, hey, I'm not intimidated.
It's not a stare down. It's like a brief connection. Like, I see you, I hear you, and I'm not afraid to engage. Okay, what about your tone of voice?
Ooh, yes.
Because how do you use that to project confidence without being, like, aggressive or harsh?
Well, you want to speak clearly at a nice, moderate pace. Don't rush your words and don't mumble.
Okay.
When you speak slowly and deliberately, it makes people think that you're in control.
Right.
And your words matter. Think about someone whose voice you find, like, authoritative.
Right.
They're not speaking in a rushed, frantic way.
It's interesting because I feel like I speak faster when I'm nervous.
Yeah.
Like I want to get it over with. But I can see how if I slow down, enunciate, that projects a little more, you know.
Confidence.
Yes, confidence.
Yeah.
Now, you know what else can make a big statement?
What's that?
Silence.
Yes. Sometimes saying nothing is the best thing.
Oh, the power of silence. I've definitely been in those awkward silences.
Oh, yeah.
You know, after someone says something disrespectful and you're like, ugh, what do I do? But how do you use that to your advantage?
Well, instead of feeling like you need to fill that silence, just let it sit there.
Okay.
Don't feel like you have to respond right away.
Especially if you're like flustered or angry.
Especially then. Yeah. And that silence honestly can be so uncomfortable for the other person.
Right.
Especially if they're used to getting a reaction out of you.
Right. Yeah.
And it makes them have to sit with what they just said.
Yeah. Like you're saying, I'm not even going to waste energy on this.
Right.
Your words don't deserve my immediate attention.
Exactly.
You're taking back control.
Yeah. Remember that example from the Reddit thread we were talking about?
Yeah.
Where the person was like, Cam, you really need my attention that bad. And then silence.
Yes. Perfect example of how to just flip the script with silence.
Exactly.
You're not letting their comment control how you react.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about posture, eye contact, tone of voice, and the strategic use of silence.
Yes.
All really good tools, right?
Yeah.
For being more confident, establishing your presence.
Regardless, yes.
But what about boundaries? I know those are crucial for any healthy relationship.
Hmm.
But how do you actually do it? Especially when you're dealing with people who are used to, like, walking all over you.
It can be hard.
It can be.
Setting boundaries is about communicating what your limits are.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's about being able to say no when you need to without feeling guilty or like you owe them an explanation.
Right.
And then it's about enforcing those boundaries every time.
That consistency thing, that's the hard part.
That can be the hard part.
Like, what if they just keep pushing or trying to make you feel bad?
You hold your ground. And honestly, enforcing the boundary, it doesn't have to be confrontational. It could be as simple as just calmly but firmly repeating your limit.
Oh.
So, for example, if they interrupt you, you could say, please let me finish my thought.
Uh-huh.
And then if they do it again, you just say, I'm speaking now. You're not arguing, you're just stating the boundary.
It's like you're teaching them how to treat you
Exactly.
by showing them what you'll accept and what you won't.
Exactly. And remember, setting boundaries is not about controlling them, it's about controlling yourself and how you allow other people to treat you.
I like that. Okay, so we've talked about nonverbal communication,
Yeah.
the power of silence, setting boundaries. That's a lot.
It is a lot, yeah.
But what about those situations where you just can't avoid confrontation?
Yeah.
You got to address it head on, and that can be really scary.
Yeah.
So how do you have those conversations without, like, losing it and letting your emotions get the best of you?
That's a great question. And it's something we're going to dive into in the last part of our deep dive.
Okay, great, right.
We're going to talk about how to have those difficult conversations, how to stay calm, and how to really communicate what you need in an assertive but respectful way.
Amazing.
Yeah.
This is so helpful already.
Good.
But before we wrap up this part, I just want to remind everybody, we're here to help you through this stuff. Like, we're all in this together.
Absolutely. And remember, this is a skill. Asserting yourself, it's a skill. It can be learned and practiced. And the more you do it, the easier it gets.
So be sure to join us for that final part where we tackle those unavoidable confrontations. And don't forget, subscribe to Voices of the Soul so you don't miss any future episodes. We're always here to help you navigate these tricky waters. Welcome back to Voices of the Soul. We've been on this journey of figuring out how to stand up for yourself without turning into, well, a jerk. We've covered body language, strategic silence, setting boundaries, like all that good stuff. But let's be real for a second. Sometimes you just can't avoid those tough conversations, where you got to address the disrespect head on.
Yeah, sometimes you just got to have that direct conversation. But even when you do, you can still be assertive without getting angry or aggressive. It's about going into it with the right mindset and the right tools,
Okay, so like, how do you even start those conversations? What should you be thinking about to make it, well, successful?
Timing and setting are huge. You don't want to try to have a serious talk when you're already feeling flustered or mad. Or in a public place where things could blow up, right? Find somewhere, private, neutral, where you can both talk openly and, calmly.
Right, so it's more about setting up a good conversation and less about, like, picking a fight. Makes sense. But what about what you actually say? Any tips on how to, like, phrase things?
One thing that can really help is focusing on I statements. Instead of accusing the other person, which just makes them defensive, try to explain how their actions make you feel. So instead of saying, you're always interrupting me, you could say, I feel disrespected when I'm interrupted.
Oh, I see. It's subtle, but it totally changes the tone, right?
Yeah, it's not about blaming them. It's about communicating your experience.
Right, right. And, when you're talking about the behavior that's bugging you, be specific. Don't just toss out a "you're being rude." Instead, say exactly what they did. Like, I didn't like that comment you made about my appearance earlier.
Exactly. Give them concrete examples, not vague stuff they can just brush off.
Okay, so it's about understanding, having a real dialogue and hopefully making things better between you. Not about punishing them, right?
Right. But what happens if they get defensive anyway? Like, try to twist it back on you or just ignore how you feel.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
That's where staying calm is so important. Breathe deep. Remind yourself that you're in control of your own emotions. Don't let them drag you into their drama. If they get loud or start attacking you personally, you can just say, I'm not comfortable talking about this right now. Let's try again later when we've both chilled out.
Yeah, it's like setting a boundary right there in the moment. I'm not doing this.
Exactly. And if they still won't be respectful or keep dismissing you, you can always just end the conversation. You don't have to put up with that.
That's good to remember. Sometimes just knowing you can walk away gives you the strength to hold your ground.
Absolutely. Knowing your limits is key. And even if the conversation doesn't go perfectly, the fact that you tried, that you spoke up, that's a win in itself.
It shows you're serious about not being disrespected, right?
It does. It tells everyone, including yourself, that you deserve respect. And the more you do this, the easier it gets.
This has been awesome. We've learned so much, from subtle stuff to dealing with those tough conversations. So as we wrap this up, what's the one thing you want our listeners to really take away from all this?
I want them to remember this. You can stand up for yourself without being aggressive. You don't have to be a pushover or are a bully. There's a whole range of ways to be assertive, and it's about finding what works for you, for who you are, and for the situation you're in.
It's about having the confidence to speak up and stand your ground in a way that feels right,
Love.
like true to yourself.
Exactly. And that's what Voices of the Soul is all about, helping you find that voice, navigate the tough stuff, and live a more fulfilling, empowered life.
If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And if you're watching this on YouTube, check out Shauna Pelage's channel for even more great content. We're here to support you every step of the way. Thanks for joining us, and remember, you have the power to make positive changes in your life and your relationships.